Today our guest is U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary for European and Eurasian Affairs, Mr. Philip Reeker. Thank you very much, Mr. Reeker, for your time.
Thank you, Sargis.
After 44 days war, according to Armenian side, more than 200 prisoners of war, Armenian prisoners of war, are still being held in Azerbaijan. Moreover, last month, Azerbaijani armed forces captured 6 Armenian servicemen, and until now they refuse to return them. But according to Putin's brokered ceasefire, Armenia and Azerbaijan must free all of them. If I'm not mistaken, yesterday in Baku you expressed your concern on this situation. What is your position on this, sir?
Well, first, Sargis, let me say how pleased I am to be here in Yerevan, to be able to visit Armenia and the whole region this week. I've been in Tbilisi, I've been in Baku, as you note. And this was important for me. It was a trip I had hoped to take last year, and it was interrupted by the COVID pandemic. Secretary Blinken and President Biden were eager for me to come to the region now that we have opened up a little bit. And indeed, I've expressed concern, as has the United States government repeatedly, over the need to have all prisoners, all detainees freed and returned home. We have to remember that this conflict affects people. It's too easy to dehumanize a conflict, and I think it's important to remember that this is about human beings. It's about people on both sides of the conflict who are the children, the spouses, the parents of people, and we want to see all detained people returned. We want to see an end to landmines and the kind of terrible maiming and deaths that occur because of them, and see ultimately an end to the conflict, a comprehensive settlement. And that's something the United States has supported and pursued for many, many years as one of the co-chairs through the Minsk Group co-chair process.
Did you discuss this issue with Azerbaijani authorities in Baku?
I made very clear the same points we have made in our public statements. Secretary Blinken has also called for the need for detained persons to be returned, to move forward, to address the full aspects of the conflict and come to a comprehensive resolution.
The status of Nagorno-Karabakh isn't resolved, and tens of thousands Armenians continue to live in their home country in Artsakh. So do you think this issue should be discussed, status of Nagorno-Karabakh?
As I've said, we support the Minsk Group co-chair process, and we believe that its mandate is still extremely valid, and that there needs to be a return to the process, to reinvigorate that process as soon as practicable to address all of these issues. We've also made very clear through our statements, and as Secretary Blinken has said, that we are prepared to help where we can. Border demarcation is an important step that needs to be taken. These borders are not demarcated in a number of remote places. This is not the only case of this problem throughout the region or other parts of the world. We may be able to help with technical expertise, with imagery, and we're willing to do that. We're willing to work with the other co-chairs or others as necessary. What we'd like to do, and my message during this week is to say we want to see a resolution to this conflict so that all the people of the region can move ahead, look forward, focus on secure, stable lives, countries that are democratic and that can pursue a prosperity that we believe all of the people of the region deserve.
OSCE Minsk Group co-chair countries, United States, France and Russia, have been involved in Nagorno-Karabakh settlement for decades, but Putin's brokered ceasefire lacks of signatures of United States, representatives of United States and France. Do you have, U.S., United States, any plans to reactivate American role in this process, OSCE Minsk Group role in this process?
As I said, we are still strong supporters of the OSCE as an organization, as a platform, and the Minsk Group co-chair process as a way to bring about a comprehensive settlement to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Too many lives have been lost for far too many years, and it's time to move forward. Indeed, we are not part of the November 9th tripartite agreement, which brought about a ceasefire. That's important because every day that you can have a ceasefire, there are less lives lost, less young people injured. But it's important to address comprehensively the conflict. And indeed, we are prepared to do that, as I said, with our other co-chairs, through bilateral diplomacy and multilateral diplomacy, our regional engagement. We are ready to play an active role. We have strong bilateral relations with all three countries that I'm visiting this week here in the South Caucasus.
Mr. Reeker, are you concerned that NATO member Turkey participated in 44 days war against Armenia?
We have many concerns with Turkey. Turkey is an ally, but as the President has said, President Biden and Secretary Blinken has underscored, we have differences. We have concerns about some of Turkey's activities, policies, practices, and we will continue to address through diplomacy our concerns. As you're probably aware, President Biden expects to meet with President Erdogan of Turkey on the margins of the NATO summit next week in Brussels, and will certainly raise these issues. We don't believe it's helpful to have others engaging in the conflict, which, as we've said, the OSCE Minsk Group is well prepared to address when both parties are prepared to move forward.
I'm sure you know that since May 12th, Azerbaijani armed forces invaded and occupied some parts of Armenian sovereign territory. And what is your position on this problem?
As we've made very clear in statements from Washington, from the United States government, we would like to see both parties pull back to positions, relocate to where they were May 11th, so that we can avoid that kind of conflict. Up on these undemarcated border regions, you have troops, soldiers from both sides who are far too close together, and inevitable that there will be problems and conflicts and injuries or additional lives lost. We want to see a pullback, a return to positions, relocation to where the troops are not so close to each other. There is no reason to have military movements there at this time. And then what we need to see is a demarcation of the border ultimately, but most importantly, a return to a process so that the conflict can be fully resolved.
Armenian acting Prime Minister Pashinyan, addressing OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs, countries proposed to deploy international observers alongside with Armenian-Azerbaijan border. Is the United States ready to send observers?
Well, the talk of some sort of peacekeeping mechanism or observers has long been part of the co-chair process. For many, many years that's been discussed. What's important is that we return to a process and look at what will work, what will help, what will facilitate an end to the conflict. That's, I think, what's important. The co-chairs can be creative, working with both sides. And I was pleased today to have an opportunity to meet Prime Minister Pashinyan and discuss with him the conflict, but also the importance of the U.S.-Armenia bilateral relationship. We consider Armenia a friend, and we've worked together now since your independence, almost 30 years, with almost $3 billion in U.S. assistance to help build institutions, reform processes that will make Armenia a stronger, more stable country, and we believe there could be a very bright future here.
This year, U.S. President Joe Biden recognized the fact of Armenian genocide, describing massacres of 1.5 million Armenians in Ottoman Turkey in 1915 as genocide. My question is how it would be reflected in American foreign policy?
Well, as the President said on April the 24th, this was a reflection of historical fact. It was an opportunity for us to mourn the 1.5 million victims, and I was very honored to be able to go today to the memorial to those victims here in Yerevan, to the memorial to the Armenian genocide, and lay a wreath and recall the lives that were lost, not to cast blame, but instead to look to the future and make sure that that never happens again. and we believe there is a better future, and that means simply looking at historical context and moving ahead to a better future context, one of stability, of peace, of prosperity, and we believe that's very possible for this region.
During the past several weeks, we have seen a sharp escalation between U.S. and Russia. American President Joe Biden called Putin a killer, and are we on brink of new Cold War between USA and Russia, or what can be expected from meeting between Mr. Biden and Mr. Putin?
Well, what President Biden has said, and of course Secretary Blinken has reiterated this too, is that we seek with Russia a relationship that is more stable, more predictable. And that is what the President will underscore when he meets President Putin next week in Geneva. That said, when Russia behaves aggressively, irresponsibly, recklessly, and it affects the interests of America, our people, our friends, our allies, we are going to call them out and make clear that there is a cost for that kind of reckless behavior. So I think it's important that there be an opportunity to talk. It's exactly because of these concerns that President Biden wants to talk, and we will let the two presidents speak and make clear what our position is.
Can we expect some kind of breakthrough between USA and Iran? I mean, negotiations on Iranian nuclear program have resumed, and if would be some breakthrough, what kind of influence it would have on region, I mean on South Caucasus?
Well, there are talks that are underway in Vienna, as you know, proximity talks that the European Union has helped to facilitate. We'd like to see progress in those talks, but I'm not in a position in terms of my mandate to describe or discuss those talks, but we would like to see progress there. That's what diplomacy is about. We'd like to see progress and look for opportunities to make the world more safe, more stable. We want to pursue a foreign policy, as President Biden has said, that is for the American people. And what they want to see is what we can do in the world to work together with friends, with allies, to have a more stable world. And I think having come through or coming through the COVID pandemic, we all can realize the need to focus on COVID, vaccination. We've made some great progress. We'll continue to work on that, to work on climate and issues related to that, which are vitally important. And that, I think, is the kind of agenda the President will do. We're willing to engage and to talk, to try to make progress in those areas. And just as he meets with President Putin, to look for areas where we can work together. And with Russia, one of the areas where we have worked together before, for many, many years, was as co-chairs in the Minsk Group co-chair process. And we've always considered that an area where we had a positive relationship together. So I think it underscores what this important week for President Biden is about. It is revitalizing our alliances, meeting with the G7, the democracies, leading democracies of the world, meeting with the European Union, and underscoring the tremendous agenda that we have ahead of us, focused on democracy and on economic recovery after COVID. And we want to do that with all of our partners and be very clear that we're using diplomacy to, in fact, make the world safer and more prosperous and secure.
Thank you very much for this interview, sir.
Thank you, Sargis.